What's going on, everybody?
Love it. We weren't live, were we?
No, we weren't live. No intro for the people, but we're here, of course, with the NBA Hardwood show on the Run Pierce Sports YouTube channel. Talking today's 6-game NBA slate, at least on DraftKings. I think it's a 4-gamer on FanDuel. It's a little bit different there, but here to break down all the games. As always, got the usual Thursday crew, AP, Third, and Schlong. We'll go to you first. Bryce, it's getting a little hard to keep track of all the giant 6-figure wins that you're pulling in, but I got to say congratulations. Was that Monday or Tuesday, I believe, with another big score for the people? So, yeah, congratulations, and how you doing on this Thursday afternoon?
I'm good. 6-figure scores always help. Tuesday was really nice. That was the night the Celtics did well. Like, I think Pritchard started, so I tried to swap onto as much Pritchard as I could. And then, like, I was still stuck with Hauser on the team. I was like, fine, like, he'll be like super low owned. And I pretty much had locked Tatum at that point. So it was just kind of a 3-man Celtics stack. Took it home for me in the end. So that was kind of a fun run out. But yeah, back at it. I was feeling a little sick for a couple of days. So I think missed a show because of that. But ready to get back at it today. My mom's coming in this weekend. So yeah, might take tomorrow off. But yeah. Feeling good
today. That's what counts.
Yeah, super interesting slate today, like with how they split it up between FanDuel and DraftKings. Like FanDuel 4-gamer and DraftKings has 6-gamer with Luke out. So like there's a huge difference in between the sites.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously, people that watch the show notice we do focus mostly on the DraftKings slate typically, but Bryce, obviously feel free to mention, any FanDuel differences. Of course, it's a huge difference with Luka out, which is kind of the biggest overall story, on the slate in general, at least on DraftKings. We do have a half-hour later start as well. 7:30 Eastern time is the first game, so a little bit extra time to get those lineups in, a little bit extra time to get into, the premium show, the Up to Lock show, the Discord, breaking it all down for you guys, as always, over at runpeersports.com. AP, let's go over to you. Feel like I haven't seen you in a bit. How are you doing on this Thursday afternoon?
Yeah, doing really well. I know we had the RPS party. I could not go. Obviously, unfortunately, I had massive FOMO, but my daughter does dance, and then my parents had this ski trip planned for us. So just got back yesterday from that. Was a ton of fun. I mean, DC, I'm jealous of you. I wish I lived out in Colorado. I'd be up there on the mountains all the time. So,
you don't wish that today because we're in the middle of getting like 20 inches of snow.
I know. So we were supposed to stay through Wednesday. So we're supposed to leave Thursday, and we had to be back. And so luckily we did come back a day early. Because I saw you guys were supposed to get like 2 feet of snow or something like that.
Yeah,
so it would have been absolutely brutal.
The ski resorts aren't even open today because nobody could get there. They had to shut down the highways and everything. Like you couldn't even get to the ski resorts.
Yeah. So we got pretty lucky leaving at the right time. But snow was good when we were there. It had been a while too since I had skied. I used to go all the time, DC. Like I used to go probably 3-4 times a year. Get like the season pass and we drive out. But it's probably been 4 or 5 years since I've even been out. So it was a good time.
I saw you tweeting about it, maxing out the speed going down the slopes. Did you hit your total that you set out there as your max speed?
No, I mean I used to actually like so I can ski and snowboard, much better skier. And back in the day, I used to touch about 60 miles an hour top speed. That was not happening. I'm getting old. Yeah. Knees are getting weaker. Was about 50, 52. But that's still, man, that's moving. If you wipe out going that fast, it's brutal. I've done it a couple times, and it's absolutely brutal. But luckily, I didn't this time.
That's about as fast as I'll get up to, about 50. I've got a buddy who's really good. He'll touch like 70 and just zooming down the hill. Like, I ain't going that fast.
Yeah. You guys can catch me at the bar. I'll be at the lodge bar, halfway down the mountain, chilling, watching you guys go by.
Plus, the snow is really good, and it's hard to go real fast when you have fresh snow. It just really slows you down. So
More fun, though. More fun.
Way more fun. Definitely way more fun.
All right, let's get into this 6-game NBA slate. First game on the slate, Phoenix and Boston, 225 total in this one. Boston is favored by 5.5. Looks like Phoenix should be mostly healthy, missing Josh Okogie, possibly missing Eric Gordon. He's questionable to play. And then the Celtics will be without Kristaps Porzingis. And then Jaylen Brown, who's missed, for sure missed the last game, maybe the last two. He's questionable to play in this one. So obviously significant news with Jaylen Brown. We kind of know what the Celtics tend to do, when they're missing these guys. And Shalong, you typically see, the Celtics guys that are left, that, they're still a good team. They generally step up. You see Tatum, the guards do more damage. Maybe some Al Horford gets in there. So certainly significant news on Jaylen Brown. And then talk about that, of course, and then go to the Phoenix side as well. Go ahead, Bryce.
You see the Celtics run really condensed rotations, and their backups are pretty good. Pritchard is a good fantasy player. Hauser is a good fantasy player. Cornette's a good fantasy player. So you see all these guys produce when they get the minutes. So, if Brown's out, I'm definitely willing to go in to especially whoever starts for the Celtics, they love playing them extra minutes. I'd assume if Jaylen Brown missed, then it would be Sam Hauser starting, would be my guess.
I think
so.
But
that wouldn't be locked in, but it's the early game, so we'll have confirmation on that. If Brown were to miss, I would definitely play Hauser. If Brown plays, I like the studs in this game. We have plenty of value elsewhere on the slate. It's a really good actual basketball game, and you haven't seen the Celtics prices get jacked up too much from all this recent injury news. So I think there are pretty good spends on the slate. In general, you can get these guys for fairly cheap. Tatum's under 10K. If Jaylen Brown plays, he's under 8K. It goes for FanDuel as well. I think they're good plays there. And then on the Sun side of the ball, I think it's studs as well. Their prices have started to come down a bit since Booker's returned and Beal's back. So, it's kind of the Suns big three for me, Booker, Beal, Durant, and then Sprinkle and Nurkic. But yeah, not tons of value I see, assuming Brown plays in this game. And I think there are better value spots on the slate, but I'm definitely mixing in some of the more expensive pieces here.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to fit in the value plays from Phoenix when they got their big three healthy, including even big four if you want to include Nurkic in there. But yeah, Durant, he's playing kind of an underrated story, I think, AP, how well Kevin Durant's playing, getting up there in age. All the injuries, and man, he can still get it done on a night-to-night basis. Been fun to see. Where do you stand on this game, AP, Phoenix and Boston?
Yeah, I think this game, it's really interesting. It's, the Island game, 7:30 Eastern. We're going to get the news on Jaylen Brown. I think he plays, just, reviewing injury reports. I think it's more rest purposes for Boston. Against these bad teams, they can rest 2 or 3 pieces and they're still going to go in and smash these other teams. We saw that recently with Boston playing on the road trip, the Jazz, they smashed Blazers. Obviously they smashed and they beat the Suns. However, the Suns, they played back on the 9th. But Devin Booker did not play in that game, 117-107. And KD, I'm with you, DC, quietly having, a nice season, a nice stretch recently. I think 3 of his last 4 games, he's put up 57 or more DraftKings points. Again, most of those games outside of the last one without Devin Booker. And we know that the usage in fantasy point per minute adjustments when D-Book is off the court obviously favors someone like KD and Bradley Beal. I do think, though, with Devin Booker back, it does a couple things. One, I do think it gives the Suns a puncher's chance in this game. Boston at home is a beast. They blow out teams all the time. They blow out good teams. They definitely blow out and destroy bad teams, but it's hard to count out the Suns team when KD, Beal, and Booker are all playing. And again, I think when we get into the playoffs, they're going to be a tough team and it's a big if, because Bradley Beal is always hurt and KD getting a little older. But again, if they're all healthy, with how Grayson Allen is playing, you have Nurkic and you have many different things with this rotation that they can do with Royce O'Neal, obviously Eric Gordon, And then Bull has had a nice stretch. Obviously, he's not going to be a factor in the playoffs, but they can match up nicely against many different teams. So if Jaylen Brown plays, obviously it's a hit to the Celtics side, but as Bryce alluded to, from a pricing standpoint, I still think you can attack the studs here. And when you look at this slate, it's not like, Kyrie Irving, we're going to talk about that situation. No Luka. It's obviously a really smash spot for Kyrie, but OKC, man, they are capable of blowing out teams too. And we've seen Kyrie. I have him as great as the lead play. Obviously, he is, but we've seen him bust in these spots. So if you're a multi-entry player, you could get different by playing a Devin Booker at 8-8, like who's going to be unknown, or KD, who is crushing. Because the thing is, for the Suns to win this game or keep it close, one of the three studs, maybe two, they're going to have to put up a big number. And I think that number could be enough to kind of satisfy their price tags. 9.5 for KD, 8.8 for Devin Booker. So it's not out of the question that we see one of these guys, even 6.7 for Bradley Beal. So I think for me, one contrarian way to approach the slate, especially on DraftKings, take a stud from each side of this game, kind of hoping and playing on the fact that you get a competitive back and forth. Maybe it's a Jaylen Brown who's playing really well right now too, with a KD who's playing well. Or it's a Jason Tatum who is always in play, in my opinion, with a Bradley Beal or Devin Booker. I think that's how I'm going to play this. I'm not full fading this game, but the players I want to target are definitely the studs here.
Yeah, judging by the line too, Boston favored by 5.5-ish, and the nature of the injury to Jaylen Brown. I'm with you, AP. I do think Jaylen Brown does end up playing. I kind of hope he doesn't, because I'd like to get in on some Derek White or Drew Holiday, but I do kind of expect Jaylen Brown to be in there. Obviously, we will have that news, and of course, we'll be breaking all that down in the Discord. They'll be doing it on Up to Lock, all that good stuff. So that's Phoenix Boston. Really fun first game to kick off this slate, and we go to another very interesting one that we're waiting on. Frankly, a ton of news. The Clippers and the Chicago Bulls. Clippers favored by 6 in this one, relatively low, 214 total. But we do have injury news on both sides. It looks like Kobe White is going to miss. He's currently listed as doubtful. Yeah, went through an MRI. Got to imagine he's going to sit this game out. The Bulls just played a big game yesterday. I believe that game went to overtime, 132-129 victory over the Pacers. We saw DeRozan have an absolute monster. And then Vucevic was actually a little bit disappointing considering he played 43 minutes. But yeah, with Kobe White out, obviously, Chicago just doesn't have a ton of depth. They really lean on their starters, which I think will be the case here. A little bit nervous about the minutes that DeRozan and Vucevic played last night. So interested to hear you guys' take on that. But, at least in theory, a really good spot for those guys. And then the Clippers side, we got to wait for important news as well. Obviously, without Russell Westbrook to begin with, but James Harden and Kawhi Leonard both listed questionable. I think Harden's more likely to play than Kawhi, but not 100% sure on that, obviously. So, of course, this game depends largely on the news. But we'll go back to you, Bryce. Interested to hear how high you are on these Chicago guys. I think Dosunmu, Caruso, DeRozan, Vucevic, all pretty good plays. Like I said, I'm a little bit worried about the minutes on the back-to-back here, but interested to hear where you stand on Chicago. And then what are you doing with the Clippers? Kind of talk about the scenarios, if one or both of Harden misses or if they play. Obviously, a little bit hard to break it down, but go ahead, Bryce. Clippers and Bulls.
So Kawhi, did we ever figure out why Kawhi left the arena the other night? Like when
I think back spasm. So I think he just I don't know.
I kind of a tough read on the Clippers here, like without knowing who's playing. Like if one of Kawhi or Harden sits, I'm definitely gonna be playing the other two studs extremely heavy. And then on FanDuel, like if one of them sits, you could see some of the secondary Clippers as really good value because you don't have the Dallas value over at FanDuel. So a little more FanDuel specific plays on the Clippers value there. But I think that a Terrence Mann, even a Coffee, if he were to start, are viable. And then, if they both play, it's kind of like how I'm approaching the Boston situation. Like I'm still going to play the studs. I wouldn't really be interested in the Clippers value in that case. Big three, I'd probably rank them like if everyone was in, probably Kawhi, Paul George, then Harden. I know they're trying to tone back Harden's minutes a bit, or at least they've made those comments leading up into the playoffs to make sure he's healthy. But if they're shorthanded, it's kind of hard to like scale back these guys' minutes. So that would be much less of a concern if one of them sits. And on the Chicago side of the ball, they played a huge game in Indy last night. DeRozan hit a crazy shot to send the game to overtime, and they won it in OT. And you saw these guys play massive minutes, as you alluded to. I think the safest plays on Chicago are like the young guys, or like even like a Caruso, Dosunmu, Caruso. I think are pretty much locked into massive minutes without Kobe White. I think he strained his hip. Doubtful players don't play. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that Kobe White's going to be out. I would be a little more worried for Vooch's minutes than DeRozan's minutes. I think if these guys are playing, I don't think that like they'd scale their minutes back in this game. So I would look for one to like potentially sit due to rest. But, if they both play, I think they're both okay plays. Not my favorite going up against the Clippers here. It's nowhere near as good of a matchup as Indiana was. But once again, they'd make the pool. If some of them sit, I think Torrey Craig becomes one of the best value plays on the slate. If he gets minutes, he's always solid. If Vooch sits and Andre Drummond starts, like Andre Drummond would be in 150 of my teams. I have a pretty strong rule this year that I've played Drummond whenever I can. Guy just absolutely eats fantasy stats, and it's actually worse for the rest of the teams because he takes so much. But yeah, that's kind of the injury scenarios I'm going through here. Once again, 8:00 start. I'm hoping we have that news. Especially on FanDuel, all the games are between 7:30 and 8. So I think we'll have the majority of the news, and it will kind of play like a no late swap slate. But some of them you might not have.
Yeah, Underdog tweeted Kobe out. Yeah, we're operating under the assumption that he will be out. And like Bryce mentioned, I wouldn't be shocked if DeRozan or Vucevic, I don't know, you get to the arena and it's like, man, I'm just gassed from yesterday. I need the day off. Like you could easily see something like that popping up at some point during this afternoon. As of right now, we do expect them to be in there. But a lot of moving parts here, AP. How are you approaching this game? Obviously, it's a little tough to break down given all the news that we don't have. But regardless, Kobe White missing for the Bulls is a big, big piece for a team that plays a really tight rotation anyway. At home, I would kind of expect them to, go after a win here as long as they can. Maybe pull the plug early if it's not working. Where do you stand, AP, Clippers and Bulls?
Yeah. So the Clippers, they're in the 4th spot right now in the West. They're like a game and a half, maybe 2 games ahead of the Pelicans, who they play on Friday tomorrow. And so, obviously front end of the back-to-back, but every game right now for these teams that are positioning, it's like NBA right now is really interesting. You got these teams that playing for nothing, like, the Jazz, Blazers, just absolute, trash wizards playing for nothing. It creates for, very, uncertain, volatile situations. And then you have these teams that are fighting for positions. And, if you're the Clippers, you want one of those top 4 spots. And so every game is going to be important, especially obviously the one on Friday against the Pelicans. I still think in this situation, so we've seen, I think it's Harden has a shoulder issue and Paul George like a knee issue or whatever. I think there's a chance that they play, but Ty Lue could manage. He's done it with Paul George, like in-game managing his minutes. And it's a spot where with the Bulls going to OT, last night, if all the studs here for the Clippers play, it seems like they could take care of business really easily while also managing Paul George's minutes. So I think that's likely what happens. But again, if one of James or PG gets ruled out, obviously we're going to have much more interest in the spot. It'd be Kawhi Leonard. I think James plays though. But again, Norman Powell, if Paul George is out, would be the other guy that I would have a ton of interest in. So on the Bulls side, obviously big game from DeRozan last night, went nuclear, just absolutely smashed, played heavy minutes. The Bulls, They run a tighter rotation. That's something that we like for fantasy purposes, but their pricing has been obviously adjusted to account for that. But now with Kobe White out, it creates a scenario where, you know, when I ran the stats, it's Nikola Vucevic and DeMar DeRozan typically get the best bumps, and then Ayo Dosunmu. Obviously, I think what happens is it solidifies his floor, which has already been really, really nice from a minute standpoint. But now I think there's going to be more opportunities from, you know, a field goal attempt and you know, raw points total standpoint for this Bulls team. So yeah, man, Clippers could come in, they could take care of business, and if that happens, and you don't see the Bulls get blown out too often, it has happened recently, then you would be absolutely screwed. The other thing that Bryce said that I think is really important is we want to see what the starting lineup is. I mean, we all think that Torrey Craig is going to start, and if he does, he's going to be a really nice value play. But we've seen them run out this double big lineup. When I look at it, could Vucevic really like track down Kawhi Leonard? And how does that fit from a matchup standpoint? I don't personally like it, but maybe they just run with it and they try to dominate the paint against Zubac. But again, we want confirmation of what the starting lineup is going to look like. If Drummond starts, I'm with Bryce. Lock him in and move on. However, the other thing too, last comment here, like I hate assuming a blowout, even though it is in the realm of possibilities. And it's tough to ignore DeMar DeRozan and what he did. And then now with Kobe White out, it's just going to be more opportunity for him and Vucevic. So I would have some interest here in Bulls pieces. I just want to see what the starting lineup looks like.
Yeah, a lot depends obviously on the news, Bulls starters, what the Clippers do with their questionable guys. And yeah, I mean, you got to think, I'll be really surprised if they run Vucevic specifically out there for a huge amount of minutes again. I bet Drummond gets at least 20 minutes kind of regardless here. I think he's somewhat interesting play, even if Vooch is in there. Obviously, you'd get him at super low ownership, 4,900. Wouldn't be the craziest play in the world coming off the heavy minutes for Vucevic last night. That's Clippers and Chicago. Another fun game to kick off the slate. We do have 3 games here in this 8 Eastern time window. Next one, we'll talk about Philadelphia and Milwaukee. The 76ers obviously going to be without Embiid, DeAnthony Melton. Both those guys have been out for a while. They'll also be without Robert Covington. Everybody else, it looks like, should be in there. And then on the Milwaukee side, Chris Middleton remains out, and Malik Beasley and Marjan Beauchamp are questionable. Should be good to go. Other than that, Milwaukee, pretty big favorites at home here, 7.5-point favorites, 218 total. Back to you, Bryce. 76ers and Bucks. What do you got for us?
So I think outside of Giannis, this is going to be like a game that a ton of people fade in general. Like it's a pretty crappy spot for Philly, and like people are just going to default to playing Giannis and then the cheap guys on the slate. So I think that like a Damian Lillard is a really good contrarian play today. Just because Kyrie is going to eat so much ownership at that pretty much exact same position and price. Like you could play them together if you still like Kyrie, but that's just naturally going to eat into Dame and make him lower owned than he should be in this matchup. Dame can get hot any game. I always kind of like him in GPPs, like when everyone's going to be on Giannis, or like there's like a ton of really good expensive guards to play or guards at his price. So Dame's my favorite player in this game from like a tournament standpoint. From a cash standpoint, it's definitely Giannis. I mean, it's hard not to gravitate towards Giannis, especially on FanDuel with the stocks here. So I like both of them. Dame in tournaments for me is really strong. As far as Bucks secondary pieces go here, I don't absolutely love anyone. I could see playing a Malik Beasley. Lopez is almost always in my pool on FanDuel just because like of his stock upside. Like he does what you want there. He can hit shots and get stocks. And then Jay Crowder's not the best value play, but
Right.
Not a guy I'm eliminating. Don't really want anything to do with the Milwaukee bench today. Moving over to Philly, I mean, I think you could make the same argument for Dame or for Maxey that I made for Dame. Nobody's going to play Maxey at this price today. And, the way you attack this Milwaukee team is like through guys like Maxey. They're going to be shooting from the outside. You know, I think he's a pretty strong play as well. I kind of like the guards. I think he's going to be super contrarian. I don't think anyone's playing Tyrese Maxey on the slate. Don't really like anyone else on Philly, to be honest. Like, I'll have some teams with Kelly Oubre just because, like, he can always have a big, like, 3-in-stock game. Tobias Harris, I think, is an all right play. Philly center is kind of a shithole for me right now. Don't really like playing Bamba or Reed here. And then Kyle Lowry, I mean, I always think he's a little bit better of a play on FanDuel than on DraftKings, and like the limited number of games and the positional stuff, it brings him more into play on FanDuel than DraftKings for me. So, kind of guards, Giannis, and then mix and match some of the other pieces. I think this is a game that I'll be over on to the field in general.
Yeah, love the Maxi call in particular. He did miss about 10 days, returned last game. I think they said there was no minutes limitation, which appeared to be true. But if you're just game log watching or whatever, maybe you assume that he's not fully back. But he played big minutes in the first half. I think he played 20 of the 24 first half minutes, and then didn't see any time in the fourth quarter. They got blown out by the Knicks. But the way you want to attack Milwaukee, AP, the best play is with lead guards, scoring guards. The Milwaukee Bucks just haven't been able to defend those guys all year long. So that fits Maxey to a T, obviously. I think he's a really interesting contrarian play. Where do you stand, AP, on the 76ers and the Bucks here?
Yeah, it's a really interesting spot. So the Bucks, man, they've been on the road for what seems like forever, especially like since the All-Star break. If you just look at it, Warriors on the road, Lakers, Clippers, they got to win over the Clippers. Actually, back-to-back wins over the Clippers, and then a really bad loss against the Kings, kind of in that road trip. And then now they have, I think it's 5 games, 4 or 5 games at home, and kind of a tough stretch. They're playing Philly, obviously tonight should be one of the easier games on this stretch. But then the Suns at the Celtics, Nets, Thunder, Lakers, Pelicans, and this Bucks team. Obviously, they want that number 2 seed. And when I look at Philly, when I look at this matchup, they recently played a game against Philly in Philadelphia. They won handily, not entirely a blowout, but I think it was like a 15 or 16-point win. And Giannis played 35 minutes. Dame played 35 minutes, both absolutely crushed. It's just a different matchup now for Giannis without Embiid in there. Philly needs Embiid to slow down a guy like Giannis. And at 11-4, on this slate, when you look at like Kyrie, kind of in that mid-tier range, the game we're going to talk about next, Fred VanVleet, 8-3, and 11-4, Giannis could go a little overlooked. And if Philly can keep it close, and you got to think kind of what Bryce said and what you were saying, DC, they're going to need Maxey to have a big game to keep it close. But if it does stay close, Giannis could absolutely smash here at what should be maybe a little bit lower ownership, just because it's one of those spots where the Bucks are relatively healthy. Obviously, no Chris Middleton, but Dame, Giannis command a lot of usage, and it's usually like an either-or type of scenario. But in this matchup, I do like Giannis quite a bit. Dame, keeping him in my pool, 8-6 is definitely a fine tag, but it's hard to play him over Kyrie, and I even think it's kind of hard to play him over Devin Booker, who I like quite a bit tonight against Boston. But Giannis is the guy that I'm trying to get into my lineups. I think he could absolutely smash here, especially after they got absolutely embarrassed by the Kings, like absolutely embarrassed. They've had some time off now. I think they come back in. I think Giannis leads them to a big win. So 11-4, Giannis, very interested in that price tag. I haven't been playing Brolo. He's just been not good. I mean, not good fantasy-wise, but he's just playing his role right now in the Bucks team, doing exactly what they need him to do. So I have no interest in him. And then like Beasley and Crowder, I just think there's other better punt value plays. It's always going to be Dame Lillard or Giannis for me on this Bucks team right now. And then Maxey 8-5. I like the positional flexibility that you get now with him on DraftKings, point guard or shooting guard. I think it just adds a little bit to the value there, just because it frees things up just a little bit, having that shooting guard eligibility as well. And then Mo Bamba, versus Paul Reed. It's like Mo Bamba starts, but Paul Reed ends up being the guy that smashes and gets more minutes. I still don't like these bigs against a team like the Bucks, Giannis just is so good at getting these bigs into foul trouble, so I typically avoid them. But Mo Bamba, definitely not on my radar. And then Paul Reed, 5'4" off the bench. I just think we're going to have better plays today. So really, it's kind of simple. It's if you think the game stays close, I love the kind of stud pairing of Maxey plus Giannis. So I don't know if that's a rule that you want to create. I don't create a lot of rules like that in NBA, but I do think it's an interesting one because I think there is some correlation between the two.
That was what I was going to say before we go to the next games. I really, really like that Maxey Giannis pairing. I think it makes a ton of sense. I think their minutes are highly correlated together, which obviously Giannis, it's usually just comes down to, does he get the full minutes? If he does, he probably smashes in this matchup. Let's get to the next game, Washington and Houston.
This is actually a really good comment. If Josh Hart had a 20-20-10 game, what will Giannis have? So I'm bumping up my my Giannis exposure as we speak.
Yeah, I think Giannis is going to smash in this game for sure. Washington and Houston next, the last game in this 8 Eastern time window. We've obviously seen Houston, get a little bit shorthanded here, playing without Sengun, playing without Tari Eason, Cam Whitmore also out for Houston. So we have seen more opportunity for guys like Jabari Smith Jr., who started at center last game, which I think is interesting given where Washington's at as well, because they're missing Bagley and Rashawn Holmes. So I think in this game, Bryce, I won't be surprised if we see Kuzma and Jabari Smith Jr. start both at the 5, get some small ball going on both sides. I think this game could really pick up in pace potentially. Total right now sitting at 227. Houston is favored by 8.5. I think a potentially really fun DFS game between these two teams. Where do you stand, Bryce? Washington and Houston.
One of my favorite games of the night, especially on FanDuel where you don't have the Dallas game. I'm projecting Kuzma to start at center here. I think the game goes small from the get-go, and it could be a huge up and down pace game. One thing to note here is Amen Thompson is going to be mega chalk on DraftKings at 5.2K, and then on FanDuel he's priced all the way up. I think he's in the 7Ks. He's 7.6. So I don't think anyone plays him at 7.6. I think he's completely viable there. I was asked this question in Discord earlier if I'm allowing 4 players from any team. I'm definitely allowing 4 Rockets on FanDuel tonight, and that was a FanDuel specific question. I think some of their values are the best on the slate. Dylan Brooks is going to be one of the absolute highest owned plays on the slate, starting at power forward. He's only 4,500. You don't have the Dallas value on FanDuel. And I like him on DraftKings too at only 4,500. So I think he's very strong. I think Jabari Smith is, awesome here, starting at the 5 against this Wizards team. I don't think these guys are going to go low owned, but you can get different elsewhere, like we've talked about from some of these other plays, and still play some chalky guys. You don't have to completely fade the chalk in NBA, obviously.
Yeah,
I think Fred VanVleet's very strong. People might jump a little bit at his price raised, and he's pretty much the same price as Kyrie on DraftKings. So, this guard pool is super loaded, right at this price. So I think he might go a little overlooked just because of that. And then, I like him on FanDuel as well. And then Jalen Green had put up an absolute stinker last game, but, his underlying metrics were very strong. The minutes were there, more than willing to go back to that well this time. So a lot of interest in the Rockets. I think Cam Whitmore's playable off the bench. Cam Whitmore's out. I think Jeff Green is playable off the bench. If you absolutely need a really weird punt. But I'd prefer to stay with the starters here. Washington side of the ball, favorite player is Kuzma for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think him starting at the 5 is super underrated for how well he's going to score in fantasy. And, you get kind of worried that he'll get into foul trouble, he'll do something dumb. It's not really a concern for me against this Rockets team. So he's by far my favorite player on the Wizards. And then I like the Wizards wings here, because when you move Kuzma down to the 5, it just opens up a lot of minutes for guys like Denny, Kispert. Cool ball, he's playable, but I prefer Kispert to him as a Wizards value. Tyus Jones is in play as well for me. Don't really ever have a ton of pool, but he's one of the few 6 men that I'm comfortable playing. I'd probably limit it to 3 Wizards, 4 Rockets, and in general stick to the starters here.
Yeah, I think a really, really good spot. I'm with you on Kuzma. Assuming he does start at the 5, I think he's a very, I don't know if he's a sneaky play, but a very strong play. One that I'll be interested in. Where do you stand, AP, on the Wizards and the Rockets?
Yeah, so the Wizards, fastest paced team in the league, averaging over 106 possessions per game. Their last 4 games, though, against slower paced teams, Magic, Hornets, Heat, and Memphis. And after that nice win over Miami, what an embarrassing loss against a G League-esque team in the Memphis Grizzlies without Jaren Jackson. And the Wizards basically had their main pieces. So really, really embarrassing loss there for a team that's just been terrible all season long. But from a pace standpoint, the Rockets are actually middling. They rank 14th in pace on the season. So I have this as a pace-up spot relative to kind of the last 4 games that the Wizards have seen. And a few things on the Wizards side. So Jordan Poole still coming off the bench, did not close last game, which I felt was interesting. And Koulibaly was playing good. He couldn't hit any shots, but, man, we saw the usage go up defensively. That's why he's in there. But he's 3 for 12 from the field. That's something that definitely needs to get corrected. Tyus Jones, his homecoming there playing in Memphis was terrible. I was heavy Tyus Jones. I think I locked him into all my lineups. I like the matchup. I thought against a Memphis team without a lot of their main players, I thought Tyus would have cooked. He did not. He was 1 for 9 from the field and 9 assists. And this guy's been, a double-digit assist machine. So he's definitely a guy that I think could be in a position to have a nice bounce-back game. 6.2K, a very fair price tag. I'll go right back to him. Corey Kispert, 5'4". The price tag is starting to come up. I do think there's some risk there at the adjusted price tag, but he's fine. The play here, I'm with Bryce. It's Kyle Kuzma. It's this game. You're getting Kuzma at the 5. You're getting Jabari Smith at the 5. So what did we see the Rockets do against the Spurs last game, which I was surprised they started Jabari Smith at the 5. It wasn't working. Eamon Thompson had a bad start, so he gets yanked, and we get more Jock Landale, obviously, to match up against the size that the Spurs have with Wemby. Well, that's not going to be the case tonight. I think Jock Landale is a fine play, but I don't think the minute security is there in this matchup if the game stays small. The other thing, if this game stays small, the pace should be ridiculous. I think overs is a great bet. 227.5. I know an overs bet right now at this point in the NBA season has not been a profitable one at all. Unders have been hitting at an insane clip. I think this spot is different just because both teams small, up and down the court, not any clunky bigs, slowing things down. And I think we see tight rotations on both sides. So really it's Kuzma, my favorite play, followed by Tyus Jones. And then I do have interest in Bilal Koulibaly, 4-5, very fair price tag. Those are the guys on the Wizards side that I want to consider. And then on the Rockets side, it becomes really interesting. Jabari Smith, smash spot. I think the backcourt, absolute smash spot for these guys. Jalen Green, Eamon Thompson, Fred VanVleet. Who is it going to be? That's where I'm not obviously as confident. Jalen Green, it really comes down to is he hitting his shots? If he is, he's going to absolutely cook. If not, you tend to see like Fred VanVleet right now take over and manage the game. We saw that against the Spurs, 7 for 16 from the field. Was really nice from a peripheral stat standpoint. So here's how I'm tackling this spot. If I was building 1 to 3 lineups, I would start them with Jabari Smith and Kyle Kuzma. I have a ton of interest in those two guys. Bilal Koulibaly because of the price relief and now his role that he's in. And obviously the Wizards aren't playing for anything. They're just trying to build chemistry. And this is their rookie that they're trying to develop. I think he's a guy that we need to start playing in DFS formats. I think he's going to make for a great value down the stretch. I think his minutes are very, very secure on this Wizards team. And then it's looking at the other side, and it's mixing in this backcourt of Eamon Thompson, Jalen Green, and Fred VanVleet. I think I just want to mix and match them in with the Jabari Smith, and then I'll have a little bit of Jock Landale just because if he gets 25-plus minutes again like he did against the Spurs, he's going to absolutely crush against this Wizards team. So this obviously going to be a really great game to target on tonight's slate. I'm still setting 3 max from any one team. And honestly, I think 2 max would be fine in this game, but getting 4 players, 2 from each side, is definitely going to be a viable route and a good way to target this game.
Yeah, really, really fun game, Washington and Houston. And that's the end of the FanDuel slate. But the DraftKings slate does have the 2 late games, which are 2 hours after the early games. So, yeah, kind of a split slate here on DraftKings, the 2 late games, New York and Portland, Dallas and OKC. Obviously, the Dallas Mavericks, kind of the biggest talking point on this slate. We'll get to that game in a second. Before we do, though, we got to talk about maybe the worst game on this slate, New York and Portland. 204 total in this one. Obviously, a very low total, lowest on the 6-game slate. New York are also big favorites, 11.5-point favorites. Knicks are mostly healthy at this point outside of, I guess, Julius Randle. Robinson's still out, but they've been out so long, it kind of feels like, as long as nobody else is out, we know what they're going to do. Jalen Brunson been back in there. We've seen, Josh Hart, just the incredible game against Philly, 67 fantasy points last time out. But these guys are getting a little expensive. And then on the Portland side, looks like they'll be without, of course, Brogdon and Sharp. Jeremy Grant, Jabari Walker also ruled out. And then we're waiting on Anthony Simons, which is obviously significant news. He's got a huge role on this team, with all these guys out. So if he sits, could be potentially looking going back to a Scoot Henderson, a Delano Banton. Bryce, I think would be interesting. Not sure we're going to have this news prior to the other 4 games locking, but certainly significant news on the Portland side of the ball. How are you approaching this one, Bryce?
So the nice thing about the Simons thing is it's like you're going to have so much exposure to this Dallas game. Like you can easily shift some from like Dallas to Banton or to some of these cheap Portland guys if Simons sits. So I would play Simons as in, and then you can adjust like late swap wise. I'd assume that you guys have no information, or not, we don't either, from these late games.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of I'll assume Simons in for this show. I don't have tons of interest in Portland in general. If he were to sit, then I would like him. I would actually like Simons if he plays more than most of these Portland guys. Don't love the Portland wings here. It's one of the uglier games on the slate. If Banton starts, I definitely have interest in him. I think you could make a case for like a Chris Murray, Kamara. Don't really like Ayton here. And then like the Portland bench guys to me are just not necessary with all this Dallas value we're going to have in the late game. So, probably an understance on Portland for me, other than Anthony, who can just, absolutely nuke a slate. And, we've talked all day about like this 8K some price point where, you can get a little different from Kyrie just by playing other guards at that price. So I'll probably be over on him and under on the rest of the team. Moving over to the Knicks, kind of tough to play them at some of these prices. Like, I think Brunson's going to be extremely low owned. I actually like him in tournaments. You can get Portland however you want, but any logical coach would kind of tone back these guys' minutes at this point in the year. And then there's Tom Thibodeau, who's just simply not doing it. So, I think kind of all the guys who start for the Knicks are in play. You say 11.5-point spread, I say Tom Thibodeau. It's kind of hard to predict, even in a blowout, he'll play these guys. So, unless it's like a 30-point game, I don't think you'll see them sitting on the bench. You're paying for the minutes. You're paying a premium for these guys now. But I would definitely leave them all in the pool. I'd probably rank them Brunson, Hart, DiVincenzo, and then after that, I don't love them. I think Anunoby is going to go completely unowned if you like him. Hartenstein, I'm not eliminating him from my pool, but I can't imagine I get much when I run my teams.
It's a really good point on the Knicks. We make it often with Tom Thibodeau, and I used to have Wolves season tickets when he was coach, and he just leaves these guys in there. If the Knicks win by 11 or 12 as they're predicted to do, these guys are going to be in there to finish the game or pulled with 40 seconds or something. He just does not reduce the minutes of the guys that he trusts, and we know AP exactly who Tom Thibodeau trusts on this team right now. Obviously seeing big games from Brunson, Josh Hart, DiVincenzo. And against Portland, you got to kind of imagine, even with the low total and the blowout risk, those guys are going to get the job done for the most part. Where do you stand, AP, Knicks and Blazers?
Yeah, so, really interesting spot. Jalen Brunson, like I get it from a minute standpoint, and we know Thibs loves to run tight rotations. It does look like he's somewhat managing Brunson's minutes. I have him between 34 to 36 in a very close game. We all know that Brunson was playing 40 plus, 41, previously. So you get a little bit of management there of his minutes. Obviously, that last game was a blowout. They played Philly back-to-back. The first game stayed close. Brunson played 32 minutes. That was his second game back from this injury. His first game back against Orlando played 28. Second game against Philly was a blow-up, 27 minutes. But again, I don't think he re-entered the fourth quarter. So I have him in a close game at 34 to 36. Mm-hmm. Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo are the two guys that he can still run into the ground, especially Josh Hart. OG Anunoby, first game back, played 28. Again, that was a blowout. I think it's safe to say 32 to 34 for OG if it stays close. And then Hartenstein, his minutes are look to be fully managed right now as well. He hasn't played more than like 23 in quite some time. So there's a little bit of minutes being managed there. And the other thing too is, like, I think this game gets out of hand. The downgrade of Anthony Simons is very concerning. I think it does create swap opportunities because we've seen Scoot get a spot start over Banton. We've seen Banton start. And so it's kind of the situation where it looks like some sites are projecting Banton to start. That it could be the case where Scoot and Delano Banton start tonight if Simons is out. We just have to wait and see. Obviously, that news is going to come much later. I will say the one thing that's interesting, and I looked this up because I'm like, man, DeAndre Ayton, what is he doing? Like, what's going on? Because he's been ridiculous. So since February 1st, in this note, if you go over to the heat map, if you remember, I added a note section per lock time just to like raw notes that things that I find that are really interesting, I post there. But since February 1st, DeAndre Ayton, he's averaging 48.4 fantasy points per 36 minutes. That's a 9.47 increase over his season average. A 23.5% usage rate, which honestly is pretty elite for a big. I mean, obviously what DeAndre Ayton is doing right now, he's highly motivated for some reason. Maybe he's just trying to justify that.
You got called out in the media, I think, by, for getting the big contract and not performing well. And he's like, I'm a max player. And it kind of seemed like it lit. I didn't think so that it would at the time, but now in retrospect, it does kind of seem like there's a correlation between all that stuff and how he's performed this last, month and a half at this point.
Yeah, and I actually I don't mind a slower pace game for a big like Ayton. I think it's, the rebounds are going to be there. His shot attempts playing with a bunch of scrubs. So that's what this Blazers team is right now. If Simons is out, it's going to be there. So I think Ayton is a really good tournament play at 7-7 if we get that motivated Ayton tonight. And I think the matchup is perfectly fine. So while I'm not that interested in this game, 204 total obviously doesn't check a lot of boxes for me. I do have some interest in DeAndre Ayton at 7-7, just because he's putting up some insane numbers right now, and the stats behind it really back it up. So on the Blazers side, Ayton's the only guy, and I'm not going crazy. I think you could get, if you play 15% Ayton, I think 15 to 20% Ayton, you're going to be well over the field. I don't think a lot of people are going to play him on the slate. So that's my approach to this game, a game that I'm not going to have a ton of exposure to.
Yeah, people just don't really play DeAndre Ayton, but man, if you look at what he's doing. 57 plus in 3 of the last 5 games. Even one of the games he didn't, he put up a 43, which is perfectly fine at 7,700. So I do like that call. Feels a little risky, but hey, you're swinging for the fences there. In GPPs, you should be anyway. So I do like that DeAndre Ayton call. Let's get to the last game of the night. It is certainly an important one. Dallas and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Of course, the big news here, Luka Doncic going to sit this game out. He's been on an absolute tear doing pretty much everything for Dallas. He always does, but especially over this last month or so period. Other than him, these teams should be pretty much healthy. We'll obviously see Kyrie Irving, take over the reins of the offense for Dallas. I'm sure he'll be very popular at 8,400. AP did mention it. We have seen him underperform a little bit relative to expectations a few times when Luka has sat out this year, but I do think he's a pretty strong play. And then, the rest of Dallas, Bryce, they're so cheap. Hardaway at 4K, Exum 3.6. You've got Washington at 5,100. Daniel Gafford, who hasn't missed a field goal attempt in 5 straight games. Pretty crazy. He's been performing well. Everybody that's left for Dallas, Derek Jones Jr. is 3,700. It does seem like Dallas is almost inevitably going to have some of this value get home. I think it's a little difficult to determine which it'll be, but it could be multiple pieces. So, yeah, really interesting spot for Dallas. Interested to hear what you're doing with Kyrie and the rest of the Mavericks. And then, OKC, obviously a very strong team. I would expect them to play well here. They are big favorites, 11-point home favorites against Dallas, 235 total. So you do have, I think, some real blowout risk here where OKC kind of just runs Dallas out of the gym without Luka, but I'm not sure how much you can really adjust for that on a little bit of a shorter slate. Talk to us, Bryce, Dallas and OKC.
Game in the night to kind of decide what you want to do with on DraftKings. I think it makes a lot of sense to leave, a lot of these spots open and say Simon sits, I already talked about swapping to Portland, but Kyrie's a tough fade. I think it's doable. As you've said, I'm likely going to play, if I had to guess right now, between 50 and 60% Kyrie. I don't see myself locking him tonight. I think it's 4 max Dallas. I don't think you go to 5 here. I think there's enough value in other games and other spots as to where, I don't think you need the absolute max of Dallas, in cash games and the optimal teams, it's probably going to be 5 Dallas. There are paths to them failing. Say OKC blows them out. Kyrie is first guy to get shortchanged in that situation here.
Yep.
But the cheap guys will likely still get there. So that's why I wouldn't shove Kyrie tonight personally. I can see paths to him failing. As far as the cheap guys go, I think Exum is probably one of the better plays. He's only 3,600. He's going to be out there regardless. Tim Hardaway, he's only $4,000. I think it's really tough not to play Tim Hardaway in this spot.
Yeah.
And then, I think the bigs, if anything, it might hurt them a bit just because Luka creates so many shots for them. It's going to be if Gafford gets there, it's not going to be based on Luka's playmaking. It's going to be based on offensive rebounding and putbacks. He's not the first look to go to in the post. So I think Gafford would probably be my favorite Dallas chalk fade if you're looking to fade one of these guys. I think PJ Washington's a good play. I think even Josh Green, Jaden Hardy are viable. I don't think anyone's going to play Jaden Hardy at 3K. I think he's in play. He's not my absolute favorite player or anything, but if he gets hot, they'll leave him in. He can get blowout run here. So he's going to be in my pool, not super owned, but I don't think he's going to really carry any ownership. So 4 max Dallas, kind of try and rotate it. If you're trying to not necessarily play it safer or a higher floor play would be to play a minimum of 2 Dallas. I don't think I'm going to put a minimum on them tonight just because I'm going to have so many already. It would be kind of hard for me to find teams without at least 1 Dallas guy in it tonight, but you could even put a minimum on them.
Yeah. Well, okay. So excited you talk about that, Brad? Did I miss it?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. OKC side, they're fully healthy again. I think any of them can get there. It's obviously a good matchup against Dallas here in this spot. I think SGA, solid play. I don't think he'll be under-owned. In this spot, I generally try and not I don't force runbacks just because cheap Dallas guys get there and it's a blowout. I could see 3 cheap Dallas guys being in the winning team with no one from OKC. So I'm not forcing any runbacks here. Don't really love any OKC cheap players. I'm pretty much sticking to like SGA as like the top play here. I'd put Chet 2, Giddey 3, Jalen Williams 4. I'm just a little worried they might be able to manage Jalen Williams' minutes here a bit. Don't love Dort or like a Kassan Wallace type of guy today. I just think it's not really necessary to go there. Like I'll have him on the night slate, but not on the main.
Yeah, it all makes sense to me, and I think you nailed Dallas where it's like they kind of have a weird roster right now. Where they are just, I mean, what do they have? 6 eligible center players with Gafford, Lively, Kleber, Powell, and yeah, I could just see the minutes kind of going all over the place there, especially if this game gets out of hand. But the guards and the wings for Dallas look really enticing to me. Where do you stand, AP, on Dallas and the Thunder?
Yeah, so these teams, I think they played twice. When I was looking back at it, they split games. Mavericks last blew out OKC, so a little bit of revenge now against the Luka-less Mavericks team, and OKC obviously at home. Really nice spot for them to get things done. Chet Holmgren, starting with him. So the last game, I think he was constant foul trouble. He had 4 or 5 fouls. He played like 22 minutes, but on a per minute basis against this Mavericks team, like the other team, the other time that they played was earlier in the season when he wasn't playing heavy minutes. But he's averaging, like, just kind of doing rough math in my head, like 1.35 or 1.4 fantasy points per minute against this Mavs team. Nice matchup for him. 7-2, I think, is a very fair price tag. And Chet's been putting up some big numbers. We saw a monster slate breaking performance against Houston, and we're seeing a little bit more of a solidified floor from Chet Holmgren. I like this matchup quite a bit for him, 7.2K. I think he's going to be a phenomenal play. Jalen Williams, 6'8". Now, again, coming off, little the ankle injury, sat out against Indy. But outside of that, if he gets full minutes, he's going to absolutely smash this price tag. Feels a little bit too cheap there. I have him as a really strong tournament play tonight at 6'8". And then Shea, you can always play 10-4. Again, feels a little too cheap. So while like everyone's going to be looking at the Mavericks side, those 3 players I have a ton of interest in on the OKC side. Like I think OKC takes care of business. And if they do, like players like Kyrie are far more riskier because they're just going to get yanked if the game gets out of hand. But you have to assume that even if it blows out, like if OKC puts up a big number, I think SGA could pay off his price tag. Same with Chet, same with Jalen Williams. So I have a ton of interest in those 3. Not all together. It's tougher to play kind of the scrub pieces. We saw, so Josh Giddey, I think, is an interesting talking point. I really have concerns. We've seen Gordon Hayward now, and this was when Jalen Williams was out, but we saw him play up to 29 minutes, and he's playing his role really nicely. It's just being a vet, playing, being a glue guy, and not taking a ton of shots or anything like that. Obviously, letting SGA, Jalen Williams, and Chet do that. But from a minute standpoint, I do think it brings some risk into a guy like Josh Giddey with Gordon Hayward, Case and Wallace, etc., as kind of key rotational pieces. So on the OKC side, it's simple. It's SGA, Jalen Williams, Chet. Those 3 move on. I think Lou Dort will make my player pool as well. I don't like playing him, but 4-2 is too cheap. And then on the Mavs side, we've seen Tim Hardaway Jr. just have a massive role when one of Kyrie or Luka is out. He tends to take on, he still comes off the bench, but he takes on more of ball handling type of duties. You see his shots increase. And hey, here's the thing that with Tim Hardaway Jr., he's had a really rough stretch right now. So I wonder what people do with him on the slate. I think he's way too cheap. I think he is an absolute smash play. I'm going to be extremely overweight on him tonight. I know everyone's looking at Jaden Hardy Dante Exum at 3.6. He's going to be the chalk value piece. I'm going to be on him as well, but I have far more interest in Tim Hardaway at 4K. We saw Tim Hardaway reach like 5K or 5,500 or middle of the season. In these spots, he was still crushing when one of Luka or Kyrie was out. So THJ, definitely the guy I want to go to. And then Kyrie, I mean, if this game stays close, like OKC plays with a ton of pace, it would be dumb just to like full fade Kyrie Irving in multi-entry formats. So Kyrie, I have him as an elite play, 8,400, just too cheap for the role that he's going to take on. The only concern is if the game blows out and gets out of hand. And again, I did say at the start of the show, we've seen Kyrie bust in these spots. But in these spots, I was also playing Kyrie. I'm going to go back to Kyrie tonight. He's just such a smash play in these spots historically. But I'm not locking him in. That's the one thing I want to say. I'm not locking him in at 8,400. But I'm definitely going to be overweight in relation to the field.
Yeah. The nice thing about THJ, I think all three of us are on him. He does have like slate breaking upside, right? I think his floor is pretty good here too, but he is one of those players that you might absolutely have to have. So absolutely I'm in on Tim Hardaway Jr. as well. That's all 6 games. No, doesn't look like any new news has dropped while we've been on air. So we'll go right into our plays of the day before we get on out of here. We'll start with you, Bryce, your play of the day today.
I'll go with Dylan Brooks. Someone you can use on both sides, super cheap. Love the matchup against a fast-paced Wizards team. I think he hits the boards hard. Could see him put up a good stock game as well. Like him a lot. Obviously Tim Hardaway's there as well. But yeah, someone you can use on both sides. Really like Dylan Brooks to fill out your rosters.
All right, Dylan Brooks. Let's go over to UAP, your gentleman's play of the day.
Yeah, I like this. So I like this spot, the matchup, the price tag. I mean, Chet Holmgren was 8K just a few games ago. Now he's at one of the cheaper points that we've seen all season, 7.2K. For some reason, DraftKings just making him more favorably priced. So 7.2 for Chet. I think he smashes tonight. Obviously, I'm going to be overweight on this game. A lot of us are, but I think Chet's going to be the anchor that gets it done for us.
All right, Chet Holmgren. I wasn't sure my play of the day was going to make it through YouTube, but he did. Mr. Kyle Kuzma, expect him to start at the 5 for the Wizards. I think it's going to be a fast-paced, small ball type game between the Wizards and the Rockets. And I like the counterpart, too, on the other side, assuming he gets to start at the 5, Jabari Smith Jr. But Kyle Kuzma, the Mom's Basement play of the day. That'll do it for this show for members. We will have the Up to Lock show coming up, I think, in about 45 minutes with the half-hour later start to NBA. We appreciate all you guys watching. Hit the like button on the way out if you haven't yet done so. And we will be back same time, same place tomorrow. For AP, for Third and Schlong, I'm Draft Sheet, and we're out of here.